Imagine opening your investment account one morning and realizing something strange. You contributed $6,000 this year, but your portfolio grew by $11,000. Not because you found some secret stock, not because you became a trading genius, not because you got lucky, but because your money made more money than you did. Sounds crazy, right? Yet this is the exact moment that separates people who are building wealth from people who are simply saving. And here's what's fascinating. Most investors never realize when this moment happens. Even worse, many quit investing just a few years before they reach it. Today, we're going to talk about the specific year when your investments usually start contributing more to your portfolio than you do. When the machine finally turns on. And once you understand this moment, you'll never look at investing the same way again. The biggest misunderstanding about investing. Let's be honest, the first few years of investing are incredibly boring. You put in money every month. You check your account. You see a balance that's a little higher than last month. Nothing exciting happens. If you're investing $500 per month, that's $6,000 per year. Maybe the market earns you another $400, maybe $600, maybe $800. And you think, wait a second, all this effort for a few $100s? That's exactly why so many people stop. They expect compounding to feel powerful immediately. But that's not how compounding works. Compounding is incredibly weak in the beginning, then suddenly becomes incredibly powerful later. Think about pushing a giant flywheel. The first push feels useless. The second push feels useless. The 20th push still feels useless. But eventually the wheel gains momentum, and suddenly it starts spinning almost on its own. That's how wealth is built. Meet David. Let's look at a real example. Meet David. He's 30 years old. He invests $500 every month. Nothing fancy. Just a broad market index fund. Historically, let's assume a 10% average return. In year one, David contributes $6,000. The market adds roughly $300. Who is doing most of the work? David, not the market. Year 5. David has contributed $30,000. Portfolio value is around $39,000. The market has contributed about $9,000. Nice. But David is still doing most of the heavy lifting. Year 10. Contributions, $60,000. Portfolio value, roughly $105,000. The market has now contributed about $45,000. Things are getting interesting. But then, something important happens. The inflection point around years 12 to 15. Something changes. The market starts contributing more money than David does. Let's say David contributes $6,000 annually. But now his portfolio is large enough that a normal market year generates $7,000, $8,000, maybe even $10,000. Without David doing anything. Read that again. His investments are now producing more wealth than his paycheck contributions. This is the moment the machine turns on. The moment compounding stops being theory and starts becoming reality. Most people have never experienced this, because most people don't stay invested long enough. Why people quit right before this happens? This is where things get painful. Imagine spending 10 years investing. You finally build a 6-figure portfolio. Then, a market crash happens. The news says, markets are collapsing. Retirement accounts are getting crushed. Investors are panicking. You open your account. You're down thousands. Fear takes over. So, you sell. And just like that, you walk away a few years before the most powerful phase of wealth building. This happens constantly. People don't fail because they picked bad investments. They fail because they leave before compounding takes control. The shocking difference between saving and compounding. Let's compare two investors. Investor A saves aggressively for 10 years and stops. Investor B saves consistently for 30 years. The difference isn't 3 times more wealth. It's often 5, 6, or even 7 times more wealth. Why? Because the final decade usually creates more wealth than the first 2 decades combined. Think about that. The biggest gains often arrive at the very end. Not at the beginning, not in the middle, at the end. That's why patience gets rewarded so dramatically. What this looks like in real life. Most people expect fireworks. That's not what happens. Instead, you start noticing strange things. You skip a contribution 1 month. Your account still grows significantly. A strong market year adds $15,000. You only contributed $6,000. You realize your portfolio is growing while you're sleeping, while you're on vacation, while you're watching TV. Your money has become an employee, and unlike most employees, it works 24 hours a day. It never asks for a raise. It never calls in sick, and it becomes more productive every year. The wealth builder's secret. The people who quietly become wealthy understand one thing. Their job isn't to beat the market. Their job is simply to survive long enough. That's it. Stay invested, stay consistent, keep buying, keep contributing, protect your time horizon. Because time is the ingredient that activates compounding. Without time, compounding is weak. With time, compounding becomes unstoppable. Final lesson. If you're only 1 year into investing, nothing is wrong. If you're 3 years in, nothing is wrong. If you're 7 years in and still feel underwhelmed, nothing is wrong. You're simply in the phase where you're building the engine. Most investors never reach the year when their investments contribute more than they do. Not because it's impossible, but because they quit too early. The wealthiest long-term investors aren't necessarily smarter. They aren't necessarily richer. They aren't necessarily luckier. They simply stayed long enough to watch the machine turn on. And when that day arrives, you'll realize something incredible. The hardest part was never investing. The hardest part was waiting. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.